Ladies and gentlemen, it's Fred Dodson sitting here with Jim Hardt, and we'd figure we'd interview each other because it's the legendary Jim Hardt of Biocybernaut Institute, which, in my understanding, is the gold standard of biofeedback. It goes beyond biofeedback, but we're going to ask him about that in a minute. And I figured he would interview me because I'm the legendary Fred Dodson, who has authored
Yay!
70 books, and this fellow keeps reading one. He keeps reading that one book over and over, Parallel Universes of Self, but I've authored 70 and he doesn't know
Oh
anything
my
about
God. And I didn't know. Thank you for clearing away the ignorance.
So, one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I'm actually going to ask you, is
Oh,
how
cool.
does Biocybernaut differ from regular biofeedback and neurofeedback?
Well, you make, there's a couple of questions there. Neurofeedback differs from biofeedback because biofeedback is like from the neck down. And a lot of good things have been done. There have been little mini empires built up around EMG or muscle feedback or thermal, learning to warm the hands, which used to be that the allopathic doctors would, if somebody had Raynaud's disease, they'd cut off the fingers and the toes to stop the terrible pain. Now all you do is you put a thermistor on and you get a little flashing temperature sign. And if the temperature is going up, it goes beep, 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 beep. If the temperature is going down, it goes beep, 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 beep. And this cures Raynaud's disease. Then some of the things are actually miraculous because if we go back into the earlier history of the biofeedback movement, and I was there really from the beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about the origin story in a moment, but I want to tell this story. It was a video shown at an early biofeedback conference where there was a woman in bed. She had a severed spinal cord from an auto accident, and she was paralyzed from the waist down, could not move anything below her waist. And so what the enterprising biofeedback technician did was he took an EMG probe and he put it on one of her toes. Now, typically, in order for like a finger to move or a toe to move, you need to generate an electromyogram signal of a microvolt or so. And so she wasn't doing that. So they used very sensitive equipment and they gave her like a meter. So if there was a deflection of a 1/100th of a microvolt, she would see it. And so she's lying there, didn't have anything else to do, paralyzed. And they have the probe on her toe. And they say, okay, now, make it happen. And so she could get a deflection of 1/100th of a microvolt. And with repeated practice, it was 2/100ths and then 3/100ths and then, and so on. And then they showed the video where she's lying in bed and she sort of laboriously takes one leg and throws it over the other and rolls over. This is paralyzed. And as she goes further, then the lady is up and walking. Now, I believe that it's very cool. Some people can see auras. And with Kirlian photography, you can photograph energetic fields around the body. And so I think, I know this happened in one case, I think it happened in the case of this woman, where after she was up and walking around again out in the world, she happened upon someone who was psychic, and the woman goes, "Oh my God, you were paralyzed!" Because what she saw on the spine, here's the severed spinal cord, there was a rainbow bridge energetically, which bypassed the severed spinal cord, and the energy from the brain, like move the leg, would go down as far as and then it would go outside of the body in the energetic field and connect with the nerves and then go on down. And so I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And of course, we see that a lot with the brainwave feedback, the neurofeedback, but there are also stories in the history of biofeedback that are beyond miraculous. They're just like so cool. Okay, so then that's part of the answer. Then there are three things that make neurofeedback or biofeedback effective. They are, has to be accurate, has to be immediate, and has to be reasonably aesthetic, like in the immediacy. Let's say you're a parent and you bake cookies and you put them in the cookie jar and you discover 3 days later that your 7-year-old has gotten in and eaten all the cookies. Well, that's 3 days later. It's kind of a little late to administer, whatever the parent would administer. Same way with feedback. If I've actually patented the core dimensions of neurofeedback that make it work, and one of them is the feedback must be delivered in significantly less than 300 milliseconds from the brain event. Okay, so the immediacy is important. Now the other thing is accuracy, and then the reasonably aesthetic. We'll get to that. No, let's mention that. Let's say you're trying to teach your child to smile. Every time the child smiles, you slap it in the face immediately. The feedback's immediate, it's accurate, but it's not aesthetic and it's not going to produce a smiling child. So the feedback I can remember in the early days, there was a device called the Aquarian Alpha Phone, created by, it was very interesting. There was an LSD manufacturing group that consisted of the chemist, the salesperson, and the businessman. And they got busted. And the salesman and the businessman who provided the money both fingered the scientist who went to jail in Steilacoom, Washington. And he's a brilliant guy. And I offered him a job which allowed him to get early release. And so he built early EEG amplifiers for me. This is when I graduated away from using the grass instrument amplifiers that were built into the polygraphs. And so he built an Aquarian alpha phone, and the feedback, as what we use now, is if the alpha or theta or delta at a given site increases, the volume of the appropriate tone, and appropriate really is important because not all frequencies are appropriate for each of the different brainwave feedback. Most people don't know that. In fact, if you draw a curve of the duration of the alpha blocking caused by tones of different frequencies, it kind of goes like this. Low frequency tones cause long blocking, which is not ideal. Higher frequency tones cause long blocking, which is not good. There's a sweet spot between 400 and 800 hertz where tone onset produces minimal distraction of the alpha. And so I patented the use of 400 to 800 hertz for alpha training. Most people, just like pick something. Oh, I like it. No, it needs to be scientific. And so in the Aquarian alpha phone, if you increased alpha, the tone went re, re, re. It changed pitch. So the tones go re, 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 re. And as you can see by my doing it, this is not a meditative type alphagenic state. And so the feedback needs to be designed scientifically so that it's compatible with the natural reactivity of the physiology of the alpha or the theta or the delta, whatever it is you're training. Most people are clueless. They just, engineer, do this, and they do that. So conscious design is a key part of the every aspect of the Biocybernaut training. Protocol, everything has at least 3 reasons for being there. And if it didn't have 3 reasons, it would have been replaced years ago by something that was more valuable and had 3 reasons. So, there's constant upgrades. So then as we go into the accuracy, we come to the question of the filters. Now, at one point, when I was doing Mind Center, I was doing Biocybernaut in Santa Clara, California, right across from the San Jose airport. And a woman who was working with the Mind Mirror came to me, and she said, I want to do a master's degree study, and I want to use the Mind Mirror. And so what do you think? I said, well, I've heard of it. It's a cool name. but I have no idea about the technical specs, so please bring me the technical specs. And so she did. And I looked at it and I go, oh my God, this is terrible. Now, the ideal brainwave filter looks like a table mesa. In the passband, it's flat. It doesn't give any bigger signal like if you're doing alpha 8 to 13. It needs to pass equally 8, 9, and 10, 11, and 12, and 13 hertz. As soon as you get outside the passband, it needs to fall off like sharply like a table mesa. Well, the Mind Mirror had filters that kind of went like that. Now, the woman who brought the Mind Mirror to the US, it was created, I think, in the 50s by Maxwell Cade in the UK. She didn't know technology, and she took the Mind Mirror. She had great access. She took the Mind Mirror all over the world and put it on yogis, saints, and sages. And then they would go into enlightened states. And so she wrote a book. Anna Wise is her name. She wrote a book called The Awakened Mind, which, forgive me for saying it so bluntly, is a piece of garbage. The reason being that she claimed that the state of enlightenment is high amplitude alpha in delta, in theta, in alpha, in beta, and in gamma, which is false. But the Mind Mirror is such bad filters that if you produce a big alpha signal or a big muscle clenching jaw kind of thing, it's going to light up all the filters because the filters aren't sharp. They allow outband signals to come in and get measured. And so it's an example of how inaccurate technology can lead to fraudulent, and you can't even call it science. The awakened mind is actually garbage because it was based on fraudulent, inaccurate technology, claiming that the state of enlightenment is high amplitude everything, which is not true. In fact, we know from research done in India that, and in Japan, that the superconscious state of samadhi in yoga is characterized by super high alpha all over the head. And the state of satori in Zen is characterized by super high alpha all over the head. But there are important differences. As you might imagine, looking at the difference between Japanese culture and Indian culture. And I would submit that the differences in Indian culture and Japanese culture stem in large part from the qualities of the superconscious state that those societies have evolved. In yoga, if somebody's sitting there in samadhi and you take a pair of cymbals and clash them next to the ear, the alpha is unrippled. You can take a metal poker, put it in the fire so it's red hot, put it on the yogi's arm so the flesh is burning and the smoke is curling up, and their alpha is unbroken.
Mm-hmm.
They
Unbothered.
are. They
Unreactive
are.
and unbothered.
Yes, they're and the idea that the phenomenal reality is Maya is it comes from that. Now, in Zen, it's quite different. You have a Zen monk sitting there in Satori, and you take a little bell, tinkle, tinkle, and the alpha blocks. Comes back. Tinkle, tinkle, alpha blocks, and comes back. Tinkle, tinkle, blocks, and comes back. Now, with you or me, after the 6th time or the 10th time, our brains would go, oh, it's that bell. It's not interesting. It's not dangerous. And the alpha wouldn't block. The 1000th time you ring the bell, the Zen Satori mind blocks. It's like the William Blake phrase, when the doors of perception are cleansed, everything appears to man as it is, namely infinite. So the 1000th ring of the bell is absolutely fresh and new, as was the first one. So the filters matter enormously. And when I was doing my patent, and wanting to patent my filters, what was thrown back to me by the patent office was a patent by Elmer Green's chief technologist, a guy named Hartzell. And they said, well, look, he's got, so it turns out that his dBs per octave, dB attenuation per octave, was such, and I did the math. I said, look, if you had 50 microvolt alpha, which is not uncommon, and 5 microvolt theta, which is also not uncommon, the amount of leakage of the alpha into the theta filter would be greater than 100% of the existing theta that's there. So obviously this is not, you're not doing theta feedback with the Elmer Green Hartzell filters because they are not accurate. Now, they were accurate enough to get patented, but then again, the standards that Biocybernaut has are way higher. And so even Dave Asprey, when he had his first biohacking conference in January of 2013 in San Francisco, invited me to speak. And he introduced me by saying Biocybernaut is the Rolls Royce of neurofeedback. So hopefully that's a bit of an answer to your multiple delicious questions.
That is a 15-minute answer. I've counted it. Quite thorough. Thank you very much. I got
Thank you.
7 more questions. Would you like to throw a question back at me, or would you like me to keep going?
Well, I think in learning what questions you ask, unlike you, I haven't prepared, so please forgive me. But what I will do is I will recognize patterns in your questions, which will allow me to formulate salient responses and also new questions.
Okay. So the next one is you said biofeedback increases IQ. That would mean the IQ is not genetic, but rather a result of consciousness. Is that something you'd agree with?
Well, first of all, it's sum of A and B, because there is a genetic component. And I would not say that biofeedback increases IQ. What I would say, and what I have in a paper that was just accepted for publication in the British journal, EC Psychology and Psychiatry, I have documented a sustainable, like even out to a year after the alpha training, a sustainable increase in fluid IQ, crystallized IQ, and composite IQ from just the first of the 24 levels of the Biocybernaut alpha training. And so, yes, you're 100% correct. There is a genetic component. And that, I think, shows up a lot in there. Other neuroscientists have studied and reported on the EEG basis of high IQ people. And there are 5 factors, all of which we train at Biocybernaut. The first is high amplitude alpha. The second is high coherent alpha. The third one, quite surprising to many people, is that high IQ people have the ability to profoundly suppress their high alpha when they're working on a problem, visualizing or whatever. A fourth one is increases of frontal theta, which comes along naturally, according to a publication I made in just the Alpha 1 training. And I'm going to go sideways in a moment after I mention the fifth one. The fifth one, which is probably the one that has the highest genetic component, is the frequency of the alpha. Alpha is 8 to 13 cycles a second, and smarter people tend to be running faster alpha, 11, 11 plus, 12, 12 plus, and so on. And so we train all of these. In fact, the first 4 are trained directly in the first 6 levels of the alpha training, alpha 1 through 6. When we come alpha 7 through 12, the training only consists of fast alpha. So it's like you're doing everything you did in alpha 1 through 6, but only with the fast component of alpha. And so also, as we show people their EEGs at the end of every day or the morning of the next day, we can show how different head sites will be running different frequencies of alpha. Now, this is not widely known. Most people don't run polygraphs. Most people don't run multi-channel polygraphs. And so it really shows the folly of the biohackers who want to put a frequency into the brain, whether it's flashing lights or actually pulsed sound or, heaven forfend, pulsed electrical currents. Because I look at that, I like learning, but I don't like entrainment. It's like taking the brain and shaking it. You will be at this frequency. I command you to be at this frequency. And it's not a natural frequency in the brain at all, and certainly not natural at all of the head sites. And so I think it probably is actually on the verge of dangerous to do entrainment of brain frequencies. Okay. Give the brain feedback on what it's doing, and it, in its wisdom, will figure out what to do that's harmonious with the whole system.
Well, I've noticed dramatic changes in intelligence based on state, the health and state of a person, even in myself. Every once in a while I do online IQ tests, Mensa tests, and every time I do them, I get a completely different result. Why is that? It's because I'm simply in a different state. Okay. One time my IQ is 120, then it's 140, then it's 180, and then back down to 110. I even had 247 once. So how does that make sense? It makes sense if you consider the person's state.
Yep. Which is a function of their brain activity. Any experience you have, any state that you're in, you have only when you have the appropriate underlying pattern of brain activity. And when you change your brainwaves, you change your state, you change your experiences. If you change your brainwaves enough, you change your identity, you change the timeline on which you are. And so people who talk about multiple alternative timelines are certainly right on.
Such as myself.
Yes, such as you, the famous Frederick Dodson.
Hmm.
Parallel Universes of Self, marvelous book.
I wrote it in 2006.
Wow.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, I've asked members of my staff to order for me your newest book. So it'll be arriving probably shortly after Thanksgiving.
You mean Levels of Energy?
Yep.
That I wrote in 2010. It's not new.
Wow.
My newest book is called Conversations with Your Creator.
Ooh,
You
gotta love
got,
that.
yeah, you have 70 books to catch up on.
Yeah, well, can you give me a précis of Conversations with Your Creator? I'd love to hear it.
Conversations with Your Creator is based on the idea that you don't need an intermediate or a religion to have a private relationship with your source, with where you come
The
from.
priests are not, the Catholic hierarchy is not going to like that.
No religion is going to like that, but it's not what you need. You have by birthright, you don't need to train it, you don't need to achieve it. By birthright, you have a spark of the divine within you, and this spark connects you to the Most High. You can have a casual, friendly conversation with your Creator anytime. I have it in my car, I have it in my home, casually since many years.
Mhm.
My next one here is, what is the future, the distant future of biofeedback?
Well, again, I tend to focus on neurofeedback. Um, and so, are you ready for this?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we need to bring in several lines. One is shared feedback, and that's a trademark term. Shared feedback is where we take people who have done at least the Alpha 1 training and we put them in the chamber together so they can hear not only their own, but each other's feedback. When I did this with two Army intelligence officers, Lieutenant Colonel James McLaughlin and Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander, they did 2 weeks of training. First the Alpha 1 and then the Alpha 1 shared. Uh, they reported they had telepathic experiences. In fact, John Alexander rose to the rank of colonel, and he wrote a book called The Warrior's Edge, in which he devoted a full chapter to their 2 weeks at Biocybernaut. And he confirmed with the imprimatur of U.S. Army intelligence that secrets slipped between them. Now, I'd offered to do shared feedback with them, and at that point, I'd probably done it with maybe 70 to 100 different people. On the last day of people's trainings, I would invite them if they wanted to. I'd join them for shared feedback. And every one of those people had their highest alpha ever when I did shared feedback with them. Even though it's the end of the week and they're tired, no, there's a quality of mind. Here's how I believe it goes. Let's say that you and I both have a capacity for manifesting, and we put a number on it. It's 10. Easy number to work with. So if you and I collaborate on a project, we have 10 plus 10, 20. But if we sync up our brainwaves, the math is different. It's the sum of our energy to the power of the number of us. So we have 20 squared, which is all of a sudden 400. And if we bring in a third person, we have 10 plus 10 plus 10 to the 30 to the third power, which is 27,000. If we bring in 4 people, we have 2.5 million, 5 people, 311 million, 6 people, we have over 47 billion. So the power of the group mind is phenomenal. And
I,
so that's part of the future.
I understand fully. In my seminars, one of my favorite exercises is to put people into a circle and then someone in the middle. And what the people perform together in a circle on the person in the middle is so much more powerful than what one
Yeah,
individual performs on the person. You know, whether they
100%.
send healing or whether they speak intentions on the person. I have them chanting on the person in the middle. I have them sending appreciation, many, many variations. This is one of the reasons I give seminars now, because I know that when a group gets together, the results are so much more
Yep,
powerful.
absolutely, 100%. The first 15 years or so that I did this training, I did it one-on-one. And then we moved to a group format, and I would never go back. I mean, there are some people like Michael Jackson. When I trained Michael Jackson, he wanted to be private, so he wouldn't share his, secrets with everyone.
By the way,
But
is that fella still alive?
is who?
Michael Jackson.
Well, the public story is that he was dead. What was interesting was he was just about to go on a world tour with a Saudi prince to publicize companies doing bad things to the environment, and then he disappeared. I've had no contact with him. So since then, he used to call me like 2, 3 times a week. He wanted to have a Biocybernaut Center. He was negotiating to buy a palatial estate outside of Las Vegas, where the main house had 12 guest houses. Each guest house had 12 bedrooms and an Olympic-sized pool. And he wanted to put a Biocybernaut Center in one of those 12 guest houses and then invite his friends in from Hollywood to do the Biocybernaut training. So I was very sorry that we weren't able to follow through on that.
Hmm. Okay, but your sense is he might be alive.
Well, I wouldn't rule it out.
Hmm.
Just like I wouldn't rule out Princess Diana or Robert F. Kennedy being alive.
I wouldn't rule it out either.
Yeah.
But these are
Yeah.
not the questions on my list. The next one is what are the limitations of biofeedback?
Well, wait. That was only part answer to
All right, all right,
shared
keep
feedback.
it coming then.
Okay. So that obviously putting human minds together gives us vast processing power. Just like when you put multi-core silicon chips together, you get more powerful systems. You can offload, you can do parallel processing, things like that. So that's part of the future. Another part of it is that, well, in 1978, I built the world's first microcomputerized brainwave feedback and analyzer system. And so I studied, what makes a processor powerful. And basically, there are two things. One is processing speed, and the other is memory size. If you have a slow processor, but you have unlimited memory, you can just go out into the vast memory and pull in information you need. On the other hand, if you have blazing fast processing and small memory, you can calculate most things from first principles, F equals ma, and things like that, n equals mc squared. So, but if you have both fast processing and vast memory, you're really powerful. Well, you know about the Akashic Records, which many people believe is an infinite database of all knowledge that was, is, and ever shall be. And
Mhm.
human brains, I don't think AIs, but human brains can access this by going into theta. Edgar Casey is a well-known example. They called him the dreaming saint. He would receive questions, everything from financial to medical, and he'd lie down on his couch. I mean, he was a husband, he was a father, he was a Sunday school teacher, and he would lie down on his couch and go into a theta state, and the answers would come. And so being able to train humans to access the Akashic Records will give them access to an unlimited database. Of many examples, for example, Kekule's discovery of the benzene ring happened in a continuing dreamy state, him drowsing in front of the fire. He was obsessed with synthesizing benzene, which had become an important industrial solvent in the early days of organic chemistry, but limited natural supply.
Oh,
So,
I've written entire books based on my wife's dreams. I ask her every morning, "What did you dream?"
fabulous. Okay, well, now that's one thing I'm going to want you to tell more about. So, okay, so now that we've got processing power increased by shared feedback. And so there you have the high processing speed. But then accessing the Akashic records, you have the unlimited memory. These are the two things that you need in order to have a powerful processor. So human intelligence can effectively compete with or maybe even surpass AI, artificial intelligence. But there's another factor, which is at Biocybernaut, we've discovered, and I had the privilege last month of reporting at the Vatican on the brainwaves that are necessary for people to see angels. And it's a trainable set of brainwaves. In fact, I had a San Francisco 49er in training who did not have it on day 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on day 5, the pattern for seeing angels showed up. Now, when he came out of the chamber, I can't say he was white as a sheet because he was a big black guy, but he was petrified because 3 angels, different sizes, had shown up in the chamber and went, "You haven't been living a very good life." And he went, because it was true. And so he really reformed out of that. So it's a trainable pattern. And so, okay, so we've got fast processing speed with the shared feedback, which of course requires the Biocybernaut technology. You have access to the Akashic records, theta states, also trainable with the Biocybernaut technology. And then we can bring in, I mean, the Catholic Church recognizes 9 different species of angels: thrones, powers, dominations, virtues, archangels, angels, cherubim, seraphim, and there's one more. And so being able to contact these other species and seek, I mean, some angels, according to Catholic theology, are appointed specifically to provide guidance to humans. So if you link human brains together with shared feedback, you access the Akashic records, and you also connect humans with the angelic realms, I would submit that this constitutes a big part of the future of humanity's growth in consciousness. And what we do at Biocybernaut is what we call spiritual science. And
And
so
that,
let's hear your wife's theta dreams and what you do.
and that, ladies and gentlemen, answers the question, what is the future of biofeedback? It's accessing higher realms, accessing angels, and so forth. I once wrote a book, Levels of Heaven and Hell, where I
Ooh,
discovered that these consciousness levels are actually in every ancient cosmology, not only in the Catholic one, but in every single ancient Chinese cosmology, Mayan cosmology, Islamic, Catholic, and it's all the same thing. And the ancients knew that. I don't know why we don't know it anymore, but these levels are very, very well known. And through biofeedback, we're going to discover them again. Now, my wife, she would say things like, I had a dream and I saw this and that in the Antarctic. I saw a prison in the Antarctic. I said, what are you doing in the Antarctic? You go weird places at night. And she said, you need to look into that. And based on that dream, I wrote a book called Mysteries of the Arctic and Antarctic in 2021. It's one of my less best-selling books, but that doesn't matter. It was such a fascinating book. So for me, it's quite common to access my own dreams, but especially my wife's dreams. For some reason, she has great access. Um,
you'd be
and
a high theta person.
yeah, high theta person. And most of my knowledge comes through eyes closed intuition, through
Awesome.
silence. I
Awesome.
must say, when you sent me all these papers, I thought, I don't need to read this. I know that this guy is a good guy. He's doing good work. I don't need any proof. I don't need any data. I mean, I'll read him anyway, but it's not what I need because I know or I don't know. You see someone, you see something, you just know.
So tell us about Neuschwabenland.
Neuschwabenland is the Nazis' attempt to figure out what's in the Antarctic and perhaps even beyond the Antarctic, which is connected to Argentina and Nazi communities in Argentina and Peru and Chile and
Uruguay?
the Uruguay, and they're still around and they're still influencing mass politics and mass consciousness. But there's much more to it. There's the
Details.
the U.S. Yes, thank you. Very rightly so. So during my research for the book, I saw that I found out that the military actually monitors, the U.S. military monitors who goes far north and far south. And as a private person, even though Wikipedia says you can go there, you cannot go there. You can't
Mm,
even go to northern Canada, which used to be the North Pole, by the way. On old maps, you see the North Pole was land, and then it was reframed as Nunavut, northern Canada,
mhm.
and Greenland. Greenland is also part of the old North Pole, and you can't just go there. It's not allowed. It's called the early warning system by the US military, supposedly set up to defend the country and defend from missiles, but it actually keeps people out. Anybody who tries to go to the North Pole or South Pole can't go there. Why? Well,
Why?
to find that out, read the book.
Oh, you're such a tease. Oh, well,
Now,
thank you for beginning to unfold the many layered mysteries and wonders that is Frederick Dodson, which I can see I have some catch up to do.
I could go on forever.
Well,
Um,
do go on.
I will, but first, let me ask you, um, what are some of the best results you've attained in your practice?
Well, to start with, I don't have a practice. I have a vocation, and the vocation is to end suffering and to expand awareness for as much of humanity as possible, as fast as possible. And so, um, on my birthday one year, when I still lived in San Francisco, the neighbor lady across the street had come for a training at my UCSF lab. And on my birthday, she, in the chamber, she saw angels. And that's where I first recognized the brainwave pattern of people who see angels. And of course, it was confirmed many times. And there's never been an instance of somebody who had that pattern who did not see angels. Now, sometimes we can learn a lot from counterexamples. And so, Bill Harris of Centerpoint fame, I was being interviewed by Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM, and somebody called in asking about entrainment devices, and I described them as I did earlier for you. I consider them dangerous. Well, 3 days later, I get a demand letter from Bill Harris's lawyer, and so what that ended up with was that lawyer becoming Biocybernaut's lawyer, and Bill Harris and I becoming good friends and him coming to Biocybernaut in Santa Clara for training, where even though he had tens of thousands of hours of meditation and tens of thousands of hours with his Centerpoint technology, uh,
Holosync.
Holosync, yeah, exactly. Uh, he had his first ever Kundalini Awakening. And that motivated him. At the time, he had 250,000 customers worldwide, and he would send out emails to people. If you're at all serious about your spiritual growth, you'll get yourself to Biocybernaut. And because he had Delta now, I had like Mary Mahoney, who came from Virginia. She said, I got this email from Bill Harris. I hadn't even opened it, and I knew it was something I had to do. So this is an opening to, at some point for us to talk about the mind-bending, reality-altering capacity of humans who can run Waking Delta. But he did. He had the Alpha training. And so in that experience, which was quite profound, he had a Kundalini. Now, subsequently, well, I think prior to that, yes, prior to that, I had had a Kundalini awakening. In 1988, I had somebody come to my university lab who had, on day three, massive six-channel frontals, temporals, centrals, not occipitals, massive slow delta, about 1.25 hertz. And I asked him, well, what is this? He goes, looking through the polygraph, he goes, I don't know. Well, when he left, I said to Maureen, my lab assistant, I said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. In the chamber we were using, we had 16 speakers, 4 on the front wall, 4 on each side wall, 4 on the back wall. He was doing alpha 1, so he was only getting feedback from the alpha, from the 4 channels and the 4 speakers. But since he had 6 channels of delta going, I said, we're going to connect his delta to the 4 speakers on this side, 4 speakers and 4 speakers on that side, at the same volume as his alpha, which was nothing to write home to mother about. Adequate. And I told him the next day, I said, now, if you ever do that again, remember what we showed you, your delta, if you ever do that again, you're going to get blasted by these speakers. So it's not a surprise. And at the end of the day, if you do that, I'm going to come in and find out, well, because you said you didn't know what it was. So these were, the floor plates, 2 of them on this chamber, weighed 800 pounds each. They were Faraday cages. And they were like booming, booming, rocking. It was so incredibly powerful. So at the end of the session, I rush into the chamber and go, okay, what was that? And he goes, what was what? I go, well, when all those tones were going off. He said, oh, well, that was when the Kundalini was coming up. I go, you have Kundalini? Why didn't you tell me? He goes, well, I didn't think you'd know what it was, and I didn't think it was that important, and, like that. Now, very interesting guy. He was a self-effacing, small, bird-like little man, and in a crowd of 2, you wouldn't notice him. But he was interesting, not only because of this, but because he was on a 3-year paid leave of absence. And he had first called me when he was in the company of Baker Roshi, whose brainwaves I had analyzed along with 30 other Zen monks that Suzuki Roshi brought to my lab. And in Baker Roshi, and in Dick Baker's brainwaves, and Suzuki Roshi brainwaves, I had found a bimodal coherence pattern, which I didn't know what it was, but there were 30 people and only 2 of them showed it, so I knew it was statistically significant. And 7 years later, Suzuki Roshi died in a conscious passing, like, send out a notice the next Thursday, I'm leaving my body, come on by. And there are 45 people in the room, one of them Dick Baker. People in the room reported that when Suzuki Roshi died, something left his body, traveled across the room, and invested itself in, guess who? Dick Baker. It's called giving transmission. And so now I'm even more excited because now it's like a marker for Zen Roshi, but I didn't know what it meant. 11 years pass, and I'm invited to a conference on chaos theory as applied to analysis of brainwaves. There's 2,500 people in the audience, most of them spooks, NSA, CIA, military intelligence. And a lot of the papers are very dense mathematical, dells and curls. I mean, I know what that is, but it's like... So, but then Dr. Arnold Mandel is introduced. He's introduced as the former chair of the psychiatry department of UC Davis. Power, prestige. Psychiatrists get to define what normal is. He gave up all that power, all that prestige, because he loved math so much, and he became a low-ranking professor in some other math department. He gets up, and he starts talking about brainwaves follow Fibonacci scaling. Well, I'm arguing with him in my mind. I'm in the next to last row of the center section. Because I know if you add the center frequency of delta to the center frequency of theta, you do not get the center frequency of alpha, which would be required if you were following Fibonacci scaling. But then he aborts my inner argument by saying, well, no, you have to realize delta is not a monolith. There's low delta and high delta, and they have different generators in the brain. I go, oh, okay. If you have the center frequency low delta and the center frequency high delta, you get the center frequency of theta. If you have the center frequency high delta, center frequency of theta, you get center frequency of alpha, and so on. So it all works. But then what he did, it was absolutely cool. He starts talking about coherence. And what he does is, and I prepared this for you, here we have a diagram, if you can see it. We have a line of length 5, and the line also goes out to 10. So if you take the line of length 5 and revolve it around, it creates a circle with radius 5. Then if you come to a point, so now from here to here is 5, but here to here is 10, if you pick this point and you revolve that circle into the plane of the paper, it sweeps out a volume which we recognize as a bagel or donut. Mathematically, it's called a torus. Mm-hmm. Now, when he did that, because he's saying you have to have a coherent, 5, and you have to have a coherent 10.
Yeah.
And when he did that, I did something I've never done before or since in a presentation. I leaped out of my chair next to the last row, center section, 2,500 spooks in the audience, and I shout out, I've got two people in my database that show that pattern. And one of them was a Zen master, and the other was given transmission when the Zen master died. And I sat down. And Dr. Mandel was most gracious, and he said, please, after my talk, come up and we'll talk. So his talk was terminated by the lunch bell, and the entire almost 2,500 people emptied out. And I walked down the aisle. When I put one foot on the stage, he said, you must be a psychologist and a physicist. And I go, well, yeah, how do you know? And he goes, only somebody with those two disciplines could possibly have this data. And then we talked for hours. And he had said in his talk that if you ask any PhD level electrical engineer what happens when you convolve two coherent signals, he said that PhD level electrical engineer will tell you you'll get a torus in phase space. And so this torus in phase space obviously has been visible, perceptible by visionary artists going all the way back into the 500 ADs or 300 ADs, because the paintings of saints almost always have a torus over their head, which we call a halo.
Correct.
And so it's a definable pattern in phase space. You probably can't take a picture of it with your iPhone, but maybe with a Kirlian photography or some kind of system you could. And so I was at Mind Center, and I was leading a theta training, and
I go even so far as to say that the torus are the angel wings, perceived as angel wings, and they go out from us like this in the aura.
I wouldn't say that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think angel wings are a different phenomenon. This torus, I mean, people talk about there being a toroidal magnetic field produced by the heart.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, going out from here and like this, and perceptible as angel wings. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So, but let me go back to talking about this man in 1988, because, like I said, he was a nebbish. He was like, self-effacing. In a crowd of two, you would notice him. What did he have that IBM found so valuable that they would have him on a 3-year paid leave of absence with no requirement to come back after the end of 3 years? And I'm scratching my head. So we get into his story. He had started his career with IBM as a mid-level clerk in Marseille, France. One hot summer day, there was one of those traffic jams in Marseille where the French blow their horns until the batteries run down, and then they get out and they swear at each other in French. And in the cacophony, the heat, the din, he had his first ever out-of-body experience, and he's flying around over this mass of, jammed up cars, swooping down, stopping fights. Now, to the credit of his IBM managers, when he got back to work the next day, they recognized he was different. So now he has a new job. How do you describe his new job? Well, let's say IBM wants to open a new plant in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So they send a high-paid group of people there, and they survey. They look at the land, they look at the transportation routes, they look at power, they look at water, they look at access to population centers, and they select some candidate sites, and they leave. And another highly paid team of people go in, and with some bribes and whatever, they buy some land. And then they leave, and another highly paid team of people come in, and they contract with construction companies. Some of them stay behind during construction to make sure the contractor doesn't substitute 1/8-inch steel where 1/4-inch steel was specified. And near the end of that process, another highly paid team comes in, and they start interviewing people for workers in the plant. Near the end of that, another smaller team comes in, and they interview and hire the managers. And at the end of this long process, way over budget in time and way over budget in money, there's the plant. Now, people, natural resources, power goes in, chunk, 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 product goes out, and IBM goes ka-ching. Well, somehow IBM discovered, forget all those highly paid teams of people, just send this guy, and he would do everything. Way under budget in time and way under budget in money. And so when he said to his manager, I'm quitting, the manager goes, no, you can't quit. No, I'm quitting. Let's give you a leave of absence. No, I'm quitting. A 2-year leave of absence. No, I'm quitting. A 3-year leave of absence. I'm sorry, I'm quitting. And manager's desperate. He goes, a 3-year leave of absence. You don't have to promise to come back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there he was in that 3-year leave of absence. Now, I didn't make the connection between what he was able to do for IBM and his delta waves until a few years later at Mind Center, a company I started with Foster Gamble from the Procter and Gamble lineage. I was leading a theta training. There was one empty chair, recliner chair. So I get lectures on, and I was in. I recently found the records from days 1 through 6 of that training, the day 7 where I had my Kundalini Awakening. I'd taken the record and wanted to keep it safe, so I don't know where it is now. But I did see the delta starting to develop. So when this happened, I'm lying there in this chair, and this freight train of energy comes up my spine, pushing everything that's me, identity, name, history, knowledge, everything, to the far, like a canvas holding high pressure fire hose. And this energy just roared up through me. I don't know how I completed the training or got home to San Francisco, but the next day I had scheduled a lunch with one of my 2 roommates at the Hong Kong restaurant on Church Street near Market. Now, it was dangerous for me to go there because a few doors down was the Aardvark used bookstore. And I'd had this habit of reading 24 books a week, but now I was running 2 companies, Biocybernaut and Mind Center, and a big university research project. And I was, at the end of an 18-hour day, I was trying to go to the gym for 3 hours, and I didn't have time to read. So, okay, but Tom says, okay, you can just look. Well, all the books were barcoded. They didn't have prices. So I said, well, maybe I'll buy 1 book. And I'm pretty soon have my arms full of books. And I say, Tom, I can't carry any more books. Let's go to the counter. I dump them on the counter, intending to tell the clerk to scan the books and tell me which one, prices so I could pick one. But Tom distracts me with some questions. And so the clerk is just doing his thing. And then he says, well, that'll be, and it was some large amount of money. And I kind of went into a state and I said, well, I was only going to buy 1, but if you give them all to me and I threw out some number, I'll buy all of them. And the clerk kind of jumped and he said, fine. I gave him my credit card. He filled 2 big shopping bags of books. And I walk out of the store waiting for Tom. And Tom comes out and he goes, how'd you do that? I go, what? Tom says, how did you do that? Tom, I don't know what you're talking about. Tom says, that was the owner. He never gives anybody any discount. I saw you got all of those books for less than the price of the cheapest one. How did you do that? And all of a sudden, I knew how that IBM guy had done that. He'd used his delta waves to override the intentions of all these people to lie and cheat and steal. And so everything just worked. But there is a karmic consequence to overriding the will of another human being.
Absolutely.
And so there was no way he would ever go back and do what he had been doing. Later, when I was working with an archdruid, the archdruid said, Jim, now it takes me forever to set up a work of magic. I go, Robert, why is that? He said, well, Jim, you don't know this, but he said he came into his powers as a young man of 19, and he was bisexual, and he'd put spells on men and women and make them fall in love with them, or he'd be working as a stocking clerk up a ladder in a little general store, and somebody'd come in he didn't like, and he'd do a Harry Potter nose maneuver, and the guy'd be down on the floor grunting like a pig and knocking cans off, and he'd be going, ha, 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 ha. Well, all that karmic consequence came back as an older man. He suffered a lot.
Absolutely.
Suffered a lot. And since then, I've had people come in. You asked about extraordinary people. I had a man from Australia come. He ran a tree trimming company. And he had Delta. And I have a standard question when I see that. I say, are you aware of being able to influence other people? He goes, oi, mate! And I go, okay, give me the details. He says, well, in my tree trimming business, I hire these swarthy, uneducated blokes, and I have 2 problems with them. I go, what's that? Well, they custom swear at the customers, and at the end of the day, after grinding up all these branches filled with sap, they refuse to steam clean the equipment. And if they don't, by the next morning, the sap is hardened and the equipment won't work, has to be taken apart and then steam cleaned. And I said, well, what do you do? He said, oh, I go into a state and I install my intention in the worker, and he jumps, and then he follows my instructions. He steam cleans the equipment, and he doesn't custom swear at the customers. And he said, oh, by the way, the reason they don't steam clean is that's cleaning, and they think that they would be a fag if they were to do any cleaning work. These are super macho, IQ guys, and cleaning is women's work, and so they refuse to do it. But when I install my intention and they clean, he says, so I asked him, I go, how long does that last? He goes, interesting question. Well, sometimes it lasts a couple of weeks, he says. Sometimes they snap out of it in a couple of days, and I can't figure out why. As soon as they snap out of it, they immediately leave my employ. I said, come on, what do you mean you don't understand? You're using a Jedi mind trick to get these macho guys to do some cleaning that they think makes them a fag, and they are, find themselves doing it, and they're disgusted and repulsed by themselves, and they blame it on you, and when they snap out of it, they want to get the heaven away from you as soon as they can. You've got a lot of forgiveness work to do this week in your alpha training for imposing your will on other people.
Thanks for sharing that. I've done this in my seminars. I've had groups of people installing an intention on one person. They didn't know what the intention was, or installing an image, and they always saw it. Sadly, it is possible to hijack somebody's consciousness and impose your will, especially if you're strong-willed. And yes, absolutely. As you impose your will on others, people will impose their will on you, because you're opening yourself up to the possibility of that happening. So that means I believe I can impose my will. That means somebody else is imposing their will on me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. And having being strong-willed has a EEG definition. It means you have active waking delta.
Active waking delta. I've also had Kundalini experiences, for that matter.
Details, please.
My first was in my teens, but the significant one was in my early 20s. The exercise I was doing is projecting my consciousness into different objects, different people. It was just an exercise I did for hours and hours and hours. Huh?
Viewpointing.
Viewpointing, yes. Projecting my consciousness, and that resulted in me lying in bed at night. I was also fasting at the time, and my body, suddenly my girlfriend was beside me. My body, she broke up after that. She was freaked out. My body started jumping up and down. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was called a Kundalini energy. At one point, I hit my nose on the ceiling and shocked myself.
That's quite a jump.
Yeah, shocked myself awake. That's when it stopped. Oh, what's going on here? Ouch, ow. And my girlfriend got out of the bed. What is going on with you? What are you doing? Best I know of. I hope not. That was one of my best Kundalini experiences.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh, yes. Which is one of the reasons we encourage alpha people who come for Biocybernaut training at some point to bring along their spouse or their significant other, because sometimes people get too far ahead of their partner.
Yeah, you want to still be able to resonate with your love. Absolutely. Yep. So just brief answers, because they don't relate to biofeedback. Number one, what's your opinion of flotation tanks? Number two, what's your opinion of hyperbaric chambers?
I like both. I've done both. I own a hyperbaric chamber. Flotation tanks are lovely. I've never had any, ecstatic or unusual experiences in, but deeply restful, restorative, rejuvenating. And then in terms of hyperbaric, in fact, if I sent you, I don't know if I did or not, the paper that I published in 1984 in Michael Hutchinson's Megabrain Report, A Tale of Self-Discovery. My fourth time in the chamber, when I was forgotten there, I got into some very powerful altered state, out of body, flying around the universe. And I was so far out of body, there wasn't enough consciousness left to run my breathing. And so what I would do, because as a child, and I know this helped to increase my IQ, I would do hyperventilating on the side of the pool and then do long distance underwater swimming, first across the pool, then twice across the pool, then three times across the pool, then the length, then twice the length, then three times the length. And so in doing that, you dilate in a sustainable way the carotid artery, so that in fact, there's a Japanese man who has more patents than anyone on earth, and he teaches breath holding as a way of raising IQ. So in this, I realized that as a child, my parents were watching a variety show, maybe Ed Sullivan, and in between the acts, they would focus at the end of the stage where there was a man in a swimsuit in a big swim tank and whether it was a half hour, an hour, he sat underwater in that tank. When they would focus on him to give a signal, he'd wave, let out a bubble of air. And so they explained that he had breathed pure oxygen for 24 hours before coming on the show, so he could do that. So what I realized that to augment the Biocybernaut training, if we could provide people with an oxygen-enriched atmosphere, it would be easier to go into these states where you don't breathe, because breathing, as autonomic as it is, does require some little bit of your consciousness, and in some of these very high states, there's not enough of that left, and so it anchors you, pulls you back periodically, like I would hyperventilate, and then I would go for 2, 3, 4 minutes without breathing, during which time I could soar in the celestial realms.
That is true. I've had such a beautiful experience on breath hold. I think I died for a moment. I started hearing angelic music.
Wow.
I held my breath for many minutes, and that's when I realized I'm actually dying. If I keep holding my breath, I'm just going to die. So I better breathe.
Thank you for coming back. I would hate to have missed this wonderful opportunity, which I know is just a gateway to many more wonderful things that we shall do.
This has been a most magnificent talk, very informative. Do you have anything else you want to ask me?
Well, I wish I knew more about your more recent work so that I could ask informed questions. Let me ask this question, which uh, involves you directly. Given who you are, and given what you've learned about me and what I'm up to, what are some questions that I would be beneficially asking you, and then ask them and then answer them?
Are there techniques that assist in the biofeedback process? To which the obvious answer is, oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And I guess you already use techniques, including mine.
Including asking people to withdraw from onions, garlic, shallots, leeks, scallions, chives, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, at least a week before they come for training.
Mhm.
In fact, I have a short story about Chief Victor Buffalo, who was chief of the 4 Cree Indian tribes at the Obima uh, big reservation. He was sent by Alan Markin, who made a $6 million scholarship to train people from his company, Canada's second largest oil and gas company. He said the ROI on a Biocybernaut training was 100. And Chief Victor Buffalo was one of the first of over 200 Canadian Aboriginals that Alan sponsored. And so Chief Victor Buffalo and I became close. And he did Alpha 1, he did Alpha 2, he did Alpha 3, he did Alpha 4, he did Theta. And after he had done his Alpha 4, he came to me, he says, "Hey, Doc, I have a confession." And I go, "Really? What's that, Chief?" He said, "Well, I followed instructions and eliminated onions and garlic before I did my Alpha 1 training. But afterwards, I went back to eating onions and garlic." And I go, "Oh." I said, "What about Alpha 2? He said, "Oh, when I came for Alpha 2, a week before, I eliminated onions and garlic again. But after my Alpha 2, I never went back to eating onions and garlic because my consciousness had risen to the point where I could feel what it was costing me."
Onions and garlic, ladies and gentlemen. I can't say that I like him much. Onions and garlic. Okay, I gotta head to a Thanksgiving meeting now. So I'm gonna end this and
Thank
thank
you. Thank you.
Jim Hart. It's been good.
Fred Dodson, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. To be continued soon, hopefully.
Yes, to be
Happy
continued.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.